Welcome to Conversations with Garmamie. Our guest is Chantal Deketele. She's the director and head coach of Boxing Without Barriers. Hello, Chantal.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad we can do this.
Yes, same here. I have a lot of questions to ask about Boxing Without Barriers. First question, I'm just curious to know, tell us about the program. What is it?
It's a program for anyone with any sort of disability to come and box and learn a new sport, train, and it's a non-contact program, and it's for anyone of all ages, all disabilities. We originally started as in 2018, and it was mainly cognitive intellectual sort of disabilities. And we launched just this past summer a specialized program for para athletes.
Very cool. Just wanted to know what's the history with this program? How did it come about? How did you and the team make it happen?
Yeah, I was a competitive boxer at the time, and I was boxing at Beaver Boxing Club, which is our partner club. And there was just kind of a gap in not just there, but kind of in sports in general for athletes with disabilities. And, it's even more so when it comes to combat sports. And we had the facilities, and I had a couple of good partners, and we just decided to go for it. We piloted it a few times, and then we launched it as a full program.
Very cool. I'm curious to know. You mentioned you were a previous. You competed in boxing. You're a former competitor, and I was reading your bio, and it's pretty interesting. It says you're a coach, teacher, and kinesiologist, which is fascinating, but because that's like three different career paths, right?
Yeah.
So it's which is awesome. Whenever I interview people or meet people, and I hear they have all these different careers, it's really interesting. In this one here, we're almost seeing a merger, if it's fair to say, of all three. So I'm curious to know, tell us a little bit about yourself as a boxing competitor. First of all, what got you into the sport of boxing? And from there, how has that assisted you in creating this program? Because it seems like you have to wear many hats, both on the kinesiology side, on the teaching side, and of course on the boxing fundamental side. So what's your boxing story?
Yeah, so I started boxing in 2016. I've played lots and lots of sports growing up, and still now I love trying new sports. It's pretty much what I do with any of my free time. And I moved to Ottawa, and I decided I was going to try boxing. My mom never would have gone for it, I'm sure, when I was growing up. So I showed up at the club, and I started to train for a bit, and I knew I had a goal of competing eventually. So I trained, and I worked my way towards competing. And then, like you said, these three kind of career paths, I've sort of been able to blend them all into kind of one nice package with Boxing Without Barriers, I think, and I can use all my skills, and I definitely draw from each field when I'm working in the other. And for me, it's sort of an ideal situation because I love to teach, I love sports, I love to coach, and for me, sports was like what developed me as a person and developed most of my skills, just as an adult that I have now. So I think that everyone deserves to have those benefits, to be a member of a team, even if it's an individual sport, to train with the team and to work with coaches and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what drives my why I want the program to continue moving forward. I just think that it's a really important thing that everyone needs access to.
I was on your website for the program, and I was really impressed by the language there, and how you're making the sport very accessible, inclusive for everyone, and in this community of athletes. And I want to dive. We're going to get into the program, Boxing Without Barriers, and I'm going to ask you to kind of break it down in terms of the coaching approach, this, that, and the other. But before we do, who else is part of your team, and who else is involved this initiative?
Yeah, so I've been lucky that I had some really good people around me, especially when it was such a new sort of startup thing. So I there's some great other coaches that I work with at Beaver Boxing Club. Jill Perry is the president and the head coach there, and she's been really, really supportive of our program. She, lends us the facilities and equipment when we need it, and is always happy to collaborate and get my boxers involved with events and things like that. Um, Also, one of my really good friends is Maria Curran, who you've spoken to before, and so she brought like lots of international and kind of national level boxing experience to the program as a coach, and she also helped us a lot in the communication side when our program was first starting up and running. She has a lot of expertise in that field, so that was really helpful because that's not my field at all. And now I just have amazing volunteer coaches. There's a few coaches who have been around from the beginning, and some are students, high school students, and so they kind of come through the program and get some hours, and some are boxers at the club and have a bit of time to give back. And 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning can be a hard time to get people out, and the volunteer coaches show up every week. So I'm just really grateful that we have them to run the program.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know, can you give us an idea of what the general approach to coaching athletes with disabilities is? How do you guys go about doing that? How do you coach?
Yeah. So my sort of like philosophy motto, I guess, is that we design for and not around. So a lot of sports programs are in existence, and even if they're open to athletes with disabilities, there's kind of an existing program, and you have to sort of see how are they going to navigate it and things like that. Whereas we start right from the athlete, and what are your goals and what are your needs and strengths and all these things, and then everything is built around them. So it's designed specifically for whatever their goals are. And some of our athletes have goals of, some do have competitive goals, some are looking to improve fitness or motor skills, some come more for a social team aspect. So it's all really individualized. And the other big thing is a lot of sports programs are sort of sequential, right? Like over a season or a year or something. And you start with a preseason and you have some competitions and training, and it goes on. But ours is really sort of an overlapping kind of thing. Like our athletes could vary so much day to day or even moment to moment in what they're needing at the time. So some days we'll work mainly on a goal of working as a team, or like good communication skills with your partner who's holding pads for you, and another day they might work on more technical skills. So the approach is just very individualized, and we're lucky to have a lot of coaches who are able to support that.
It really sounds like a really cool initiative. You're removing the barriers to people training in the sport of boxing, right? And there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions on sports they might not be familiar with, right? Like boxing, they see what's on television, and they might assume, at least professional boxing, they have their own preconceived notions. But in this case, you're taking athletes in, and you're really building them up, and giving that access to just exercise, which is awesome, particularly for this community here. So you're being very inclusive. And I'm curious to know what's the feedback you're getting from these athletes and others involved in their journey, like family members, etc. What sort of feedback are you getting, or if there's any stories or interesting moments you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback that we've gotten has been largely very positive. Most athletes who come to the program continue to come back, which is sort of my main way of saying or knowing that people are enjoying it, is
Right.
that we have good athlete retention. And some some of our athletes have told their classroom teachers, or their parents have shared it with classroom teachers, and we've gone into their schools and done sessions for their classes in schools. Yeah, so sorry, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure
Sure.
I'm answering your full question.
No worries. Yeah, no, I'm just curious to know in terms of feedback from participants, from these athletes and their family members, or if there's any interesting stories about a particular
Yes.
athlete in their development as a boxer that you want to
Yeah,
share.
an interesting story. I did have one as you said it, and then it slipped out of while I was talking. So yeah, we have all ages of athletes, and so I have one athlete that he had a private one-on-one session booked with me in the afternoon, and he's also a member of the Boxing Without Barriers program. And his dad had said he wasn't feeling so great this morning. He was kind of like stomachache, kind of like just not great. But he wanted so much to come to boxing in the afternoon that, he had a nap, and he had like whatever, took medicine, whatever he needed to do. And he still wasn't feeling great. He was a little bit tired, but he still wanted to come. So it just made me feel that like something's going right, like even when they're not feeling at their best and they might not want to go to school or might not want to do whatever things, they want to come to boxing because it makes them feel good, I think. So that was a really impactful sort of thing for me. We've had other athletes who, like I said, have shared with others. They've brought friends into the program. And we have two athletes who are just starting to work towards having an exhibition match on a sanctioned Boxing Ontario card. So it's just really incredible to me, like watching everyone sort of crush their goals as they go along. And what the goal is sort of irrelevant, but for one kid, it's just like coming to an activity consistently, and for another kid it's having a fight. So it just makes me really proud of them.
For sure. And I'm curious to know what are people in the community like at the I was going to say at the dojo, at the gym, at the boxing gym. What are they saying? What are other boxers saying about the program?
Yeah, we get a bit of interest from people in the club who are looking to, like I said, volunteer and give some time back, or high school students wanting volunteer hours. So it's become kind of a known program around the club. At first, it was kind of like, we're here, we happen on Sundays. Not too many people know about us. But yeah, the feedback and the interest has been quite good, and boxers are really happy to do some drills with our athletes or help them out. And it's just a really nice community environment to have our program in.
Now, curious to know, as a coach, how has this program changed your coaching? Sorry, how has it changed your view of the sport of boxing, or coaching boxing in general? Has it changed your perspective on both boxing and coaching?
Yeah, I think it's made me see, and as I've gone along and like along with athletes kind of run up against roadblocks that exist in boxing, it's as I've navigated around those, it's made me see how boxing can be much more accessible. And just that you just have to want to do it, and you can make it work. You just have to have a few people around you who are willing to sort of figure that out and make it happen with you. Yeah, and in terms of coaching, it's given me a lot of opportunities for development, leading other coaches in a program. I've gotten the chance to develop and run some coaching courses for other coaches around Ontario. So it's been really impactful on my coach development and my coaching career too.
In terms of when you bring in these coaches into the program, what are some of the methods you teach them on how to coach these athletes? What are some of the what's that approach like?
Yeah, so usually when we have new coaches come in, they'll come in for a shadowing session, and so they'll participate a little bit, but alongside another coach, and maybe work in a small group with some athletes or something like that, just to give them a feel for how the program runs and kind of who our athletes are, because they're all so different
Mm.
that you can't just kind of observe and see what the class is like all the time. So you have to sort of get into it a little bit. There's also a training module that happens for volunteers a couple times a year. And that's a little bit more of kind of the theory side and how you do certain things like give instructions and behavior, group management, all those sort of strategies to use. And then the biggest method, I guess, of doing it that I use, I think part of it is just by my nature, and part of it is that I have seen that it works well, is just modeling everything that I would like to see from our coaches. So how I talk to the athletes, how I give instructions, how I carry myself. I try to be very deliberate and intentional about all of it. And and the goal is for other coaches that are being trained to come into the program to start to pick up on some of those things too. And then we try to ensure really good communication, so debriefing after every class and checking in, and just keeping everyone kind of on the same page.
Right on. This is a big question here. Why is it important to remove the barriers to the sport of boxing? What does making the sport of boxing inclusive to athletes with disabilities mean to you personally? And what have you learned on this journey? Sorry, it's a three-part question.
Okay. Well, I mean, why not, right? Like, why not have it accessible? Able-bodied people, non-disabled people can box. And if you want to box, you should be able to box. Just like, I mean, that's maybe just my personal sort of outlook on everything. But for any sport, right? If you want to play basketball, you should be able to play basketball. If you want to go shopping at the grocery store, you should be able to do it. But then boxing also has this kind of reputation, and some of it is still true, right? It's mostly men, it's mostly not disabled people that are in boxing or combat sports. So it's important to me that other people see a pathway into it, which is goes for female boxers, for disabled boxers. Yeah, I just think that if you can do it and there can be a pathway into it, why not have it?
No, I'm a fan of what you're saying. I'm obviously I'm supportive of the idea of making all combat sports as a fan of these sports accessible for everyone. Of course, I'm curious to know what you've jumped on this journey, and you're trying to make this sport inclusive to these athletes with disabilities. What does that mean for you personally? And big question here: what have you learned along this journey?
Yeah, making it accessible is it's nice when so we just got a ramp that's going to allow wheelchair users and things to come into the club. Our paraboxing program was happening at a different location because we were having to get this custom built ramp. And when I told one of the para athletes that, she was just like, I can come into a real boxing club. Like,
Wow.
she's been boxing with me, but it's different when you're in like the actual club, right? And the heavy bags are there and people are training and the bell is on. And like it just made me really happy that like someone like it's significant to somebody that they can come in and do this sport for real, like in a real club with other boxers. and then they can say like, I'm a boxer, and that's a really cool thing, right? To be able to say
Mhm.
that you're a boxer. Um, and for me, like I'm continuously learning new things, because it's sort of a new thing having wheelchair boxing happening, and boxers with all sorts of disabilities. I'm always kind of figuring out and learning new things about how to work training best, work different drills. There's a lot of things that you don't intuitively think of as a stand-up boxer, as someone who doesn't use a wheelchair, uh, and you don't always just think of them that they're important when somebody is boxing in a wheelchair, right? Like things like trunk control, and should you put your brakes on or off? Like depends if you want to move or not, right? Like do you want to be stable and be able to throw a powerful punch, or do you want to be able to move more quickly? So um, new things are always coming up, and I'm learning a lot about that as I go. Just today, I started looking into if there's a classification system. You know how classification systems work in para sports, and depending on all sorts of different things, and how much movement and control you have, if one exists for boxing. So I'm
Mm.
just always coming up against new things that are really interesting to tackle.
Very cool. I'm curious to know also within the community, are there other programs like this, or is this particularly just in Ottawa? Are you doing that sort of outreach in different cities and so on?
Yeah, yeah, there's one program that I know of that does boxing for athletes with cognitive intellectual disabilities in London, Ontario. Um, and other than that, as far as I know, there's not really too much out there in terms of combat sports. I do a fair amount of like community boxing and then schools and things, but in the Ottawa region, like it's just it's just me kind of doing this. So I'm limited geographically by how far I can go. But the pandemic did help in our outreach furthering by way of virtual boxing. So
Right.
there's a group that I teach weekly out of Toronto, and everybody joins on the Zoom, and we do it, and everybody's at their home. And so that's actually been a nice thing, and it's also given me the ability to connect with coaches in different places via coaching courses and things like that. And yeah, but as far as I know, there's not too much out there. What I do know is that the UK is sort of leading the charge in terms of accessible boxing
Hmm.
right now. They have a lot of interesting programs over there.
Do you know if the International Boxing Association has like a working group on para boxing or anything to that effect in terms of sharing knowledge and
Yeah, I not that I know of. There's one wheelchair boxer here in Canada who uh, he's working on a para boxing, like the equivalent of Boxing Canada, para boxing. Um, so we're sort of connected and working on that right now, but it's very early stages, and there's not too much out there, at least in Canada right now.
very cool. So you could be potentially involved in laying the groundwork of that, the development. Would it be fair to say that that's sort of the developmental program?
Yeah, that would be a long-term goal. Yeah, to
Very
be
cool.
able to establish something like that.
Very cool. I think I was I was at the gym. This is Beaver Boxing,
Mhm.
not that long ago, and I think I think you were coaching, and I heard you. I think you were breaking down at like a hook. You were breaking down the technique for a hook, and the way you broke it down, mind you, I only heard maybe like 30 seconds. The way you broke it down was really interesting because you broke it down very technically, almost like a scientist because you have a background in kinesiology. I'm curious, and I think it was fascinating. It was almost like you were talking about the physics of movement and delivering that hook. Curious to know how much of that knowledge in kinesiology assist and help you in communicating and coaching boxing.
Oh, loads. Yeah. sometimes I get caught up in the biomechanics of it because I love biomechanics. Um, but yeah, like usually when the athletes are warming up, I will talk to them. Like I'll give them a little tidbit of like, you know, something about why you warm up or what parts of your body do what, and I'll just try to like give them a little tidbit of something that might be helpful in their progress as an athlete. Um, yeah, and because I have the background in anatomy and physiology, I think it gives me a really good understanding of the mechanics of boxing and why things work the way you do and how different body parts move relative to each other. And then if when I can pull that together with my teaching experience and sort of instructional strategies like that, that's when I find it's the most successful, when I can break down the technical aspects and articulate it well and make it explicit and easily understood. So that's always what I try to do. It of course doesn't always happen, but that's usually what I try for.
Yeah, it's funny. As I was just saying, I heard you break it down, and I was like, "Wow, this is." And you were coaching younger athletes, and I'm like, "This is a great way to for anyone to kind of grasp how to move, and also understand the biomechanics as you said, but behind the movement in terms of coaching, especially beginners. How much of that information is important, that biomechanics in grasping and augmenting their knowledge of the sport or the technique or boxing literacy in general? How important is that? And I ask that because if you're not familiar with the sport, you just think a punch is a punch, it's just your arm. But
Yeah,
there's so
exactly.
much more that's happening, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think especially for the youngest athletes, because many athletes, not all, but if they come in when they're older, they have experience in other sports. Even if it's just at school, they've developed a lot of fundamental movement skills. So they have those kind of movement patterns already ingrained. And sometimes they need a little bit of tweaking, it, but the younger athletes don't have those yet. So this is where you can make adjustments and set them up, because a lot of these skills are largely transferable, right? Being able to balance your weight and shift your weight and all these things are used across sports. So I think it's really important for young athletes to be explicitly taught things like that, like what's getting your balance mean? What does it mean to move your weight around? Those kinds of things. Um, so I do put a focus on good movement skills with the youngest athletes.
Right on. I'm also curious, in terms of competition. Earlier on, you mentioned that some athletes who are going through the program have competed in exhibition matches. Is that correct?
They're working towards it.
Oh, they're working towards it.
Yeah.
What do they come to you with that goal initially? And have there been situations where you see some athletes, who have that talent that you think they could be like? How does that work in terms of, like, let's say someone comes to you and has a lot of potential in terms of competition? Do you steer them in that direction, or is it them coming to you with that intent and that goal of saying, I want to compete?
Yeah. Uh, Usually they do not come in with that goal. I've had a couple who have, and again, depending on their needs and the supports that they need and what their strengths are, one or two of them have kind of gone into the general Beaver kind of youth competitive stream.
Okay.
Most of my boxers don't come in with a competitive goal. They come in knowing it's a non-contact program. It's a new sport. Usually it's interesting and fun. Um, and for a lot of them, that's where we work, you know, for however long. And there's loads of different goals we work on while we're doing that. A couple of athletes, though, I do see that they're very competitive, or maybe they've had some experience with higher competition in other sports and they want to do that again, uh, or they're just a skilled boxer and they pick it up quickly, and then they have the competitive option if they want it. But all of our athletes would have to be kind of signed off on by coach me, to kind of go along that path. And then of course there's like, parents have to approve it if they're under 18, and you have to get your medical and all those steps, and then you're ready to start on a competitive track. But yeah, I would say almost none come in with that as a explicit goal.
Right on. I just have a few more questions to ask, and the next one here is a big one. What is your long-term vision for boxing without barriers? Well, what are you hoping to achieve in the long run?
Yeah, so many things. In the long run, well, I already talked about paraboxing. I would like to establish more of a paraboxing program in Canada, and establish some sort of guidelines and classification and develop that. I'd also like to eventually have a gym of our own where we can offer not just boxing, but other sports. There's been cricket without barriers. We have a manager who is a owner of a cricket club, and we've partnered with him and done cricket without barriers. So in terms of long-term goals would be to set up a gym just for athletes with disabilities to train and continue to offer accessible programming.
That's awesome. I have one question to ask you here, and it's a personal one. What keeps you motivated to train and coach athletes in the sport of boxing? I ask that because I'm sure it takes a lot of effort and discipline to coach athletes, all sorts of athletes with different backgrounds. So what motivates you to train and coach athletes?
Yeah, well, like one thing is that I really enjoy it. And I know that like lots of people enjoy their job, and sometimes there's times when I don't feel like going, but when I'm there and I'm in it, I'm always enjoying it. So even if it's like on a Sunday morning and I'm sort of tired, and I like many mornings I'm just like, oh, like it would be nice to have the morning off,
Right.
But then when I get there and everyone's shown up and we're in it, and I'm just always happy there, and I leave happy. So it's really just the work with the athletes and seeing how they continue to work towards their goals. They're persistent, and like it's just a really strong feeling of pride when they hit a goal, or even when something else good has happened in their life and they want to share that with me as soon as they show up. So that's my main motivation, is that it's just so enjoyable for me, and it's enjoyable for the athletes, which just makes it perfect.
Right. I think recently you guys were awarded an award locally, I think in June, right? Is that so? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So I think you're talking about the Ottawa Sport Council one.
Right. Yeah.
They do community sport hero. I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were, it was amazing. We were selected for one in June, and they did a little kind of write up about the program, which was nice. And it was a surprise, and it was really nice.
Right on. And as far as the boxers that are involved in boxing without barriers, do you think within their community, are they actively talking about boxing, or do you think we're going to be seeing more and more competitors potentially down the road? And a follow-up to that is boxing, all in terms of the sport, is boxing all about fighting and competing, or can boxing just be, training, health, fitness? Does it all have to be fighting?
Yeah. Oh no, I don't think so. And I think that like our program has shown that, and lots of other clubs have shown that too, right? Beaver has lots of recreational members who have no interest in fighting, sparring, competing, but they love the sport. They like to train. It's a good environment. It's good for fitness. So, yeah, I don't think fighting needs to be a goal at all. If you have other goals that can be addressed through this sport, um, just like people who play, pick up basketball or
Right.
something just because they enjoy it. If you like
Right.
to box, you come box. Um, and I do think that our athletes kind of spread the word. Most of our athletes turn up by word of mouth. Someone
Mm.
brings a friend, or they hear about it through their network. And I know that some parents have kind of mentioned offhandedly to me in the past that, like, oh, my kid's been talking about it all week, or they've been telling this person they're a boxer, they show off their gloves and all this kind of good stuff. So uh, no, I think not just our program, but lots of boxing programs out there have shown that you don't have to have a competitive or a fight goal to
Right.
enjoy.
Right on. Last question for you. Of course, you yourself, you're a former competitor, and I'm curious to know what's the best coaching advice you've ever received. What was that sentence or two or talk that you've ever received, as far as boxing competition or boxing training goes?
Yeah, well, it's not so much a piece of advice, but I passed it on just last night when I was teaching the class, and I said, one of the nicest feelings when you're boxing uh, is knowing that your opponent's getting tired and you're not, or even if you are tired, you can keep going. And it's
Mm.
just like, boxing gives you a certain level of confidence in yourself. And that's just sort of a very, I don't know, practical example of it being used in the ring, where you're like, yeah, I'm tired, but it doesn't matter. Like, I know that I can keep going anyways. And uh, I passed that on last night because it's a good feeling. And it's if you look at it sort of as a metaphor, I think it applies to that. Like, you develop all these skills, and then even when they're being challenged in a certain way, you know that you have the skills to deal with it anyways.
Yeah, and it's probably fair to say that it applies to life as well, right? Outside of the gym.
Yeah, definitely.
So Chantal, thank you very much for this. If anyone's interested in finding out about the program, of course, you've got a great website and social media presence. That's boxingwithoutbarriers.ca. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you so much.